Most times when you think anime archetypes, you get things like draw 5 cards, win the game, 100,000 attack. But in the anime there are also examples of how do I put this? They're fucking awful. This is what we hope to categorize today in the inaugural episode of the newest series here on JCD Gado, Dynasty of the Useless. The show that is not ripping off Legacy of the Worthless no matter how much you think it, because even Rada himself gave me the blessing.
Yeah, sure, make an anime Legacy of the Worthless. I mean, what could possibly be more relevant for a competitive card game channel than reviewing decks nobody wants to play and nobody can ever play even if they wanted to?
If that doesn't convince you, I don't know what will. Anyway, we're going to be talking about possibly the worst archetype in the history of the anime, or at least the one that sticks out the most in my mind, Alchemy Beasts. Alchemy Beasts were used by the super-de-duper Asian professor in GX, Professor Banner. Omnail, as he was called after he transferred his soul into a Gara-looking copy, played this deck for the symbolic reason that alchemy is birth, death to make life, etc. Unfortunately, the deck can't even stand on its own 2 feet, let alone be resurrected from the dead. GX was known for many one-of decks, almost all of them being completely terrible. At least it gives me a lot of work, right? I can see why Rada needed to pass the sword to another, as its glimmer only shines against the light of a star standing atop a fucking mummy. The first card in the archetype we will cover is actually a spell, since it's the card every other card seems to need. Alchemic Kettle Chaos Distill says that any card sent to your graveyard is banished instead. That's it. That's literally it. It's a macrocosmos, but only for you. And while this does play into the overall idea of the archetype, which is banishing cards, we'll talk about that little thing later, it doesn't help that your opponent can still use effects of cards in their graveyard with Beatrice, Dante, and Xyz Summon in general, Phantom Knights, Shaddoll, Metal Foes, Galaxy Cyclone, ABC Monsters, Artifacts, Mermails, Yang Zings, Blackwings, Firefist, Bujin, Dragon Rulers, Card Trooper, Chronomalies, Cloudians, Constellars. The point is that if the card was a 2-sided Macrocosmos in spell form, it would be limited along with Defissure and Macrocosmos as very good anti-meta cards. As it is right now, it's just a debilitating card that holds back an entire archetype. Aritos the Tin is a level 3 Rock Wind attribute monster with the following effect. It cannot be normal summoned or set, which only reminds me of much better cards that have this clause because they'd be too broken otherwise. This is not that. It must be special summoned with Tin Spell Circle and cannot be special summoned by other ways, because Call of the Haunted would simply be too good. But holy fucking hell, man, 500 attack to the face! Now, if you like this incredible example of Submarine Roid getting outclassed, you'll adore the fact that it's printed on the text of 6 cards! I repeat, this effect was copy-pasted onto 6 monsters, all of different attributes. This makes attribute-specific cards a little hard to play, and it forces you to run multiple Aritos the Tin to actually get out Totem Bird. You know, that decent card that takes almost every card in your hand to summon in this deck, but could be made with Terror Top and Tataka Tomborg and Speedroids without even using a normal summon. The only upside is that they're all level 3 rocks, which makes Gorgonic Guardian a must-have staple in the extra deck at 3. Negating effects once per turn and making the attack 0 is a great effect, but it's hard to bring out, especially in any deck that is not this deck, even though this deck does not do it well either. Still, some praise can go out to making a card this good actually summonable. It's like if there was a deck based completely around a Herakti-like card, but instead of the Egyptian gods, you needed to tribute 3 monsters that required taking 8,000 damage upon summon. Possible, but nowhere near worth it. Since every monster can be summed up as Aritos the Tin but asking God why he was created, Aritos the Snack, Aritos the Kitty, Aritos the Ball of Disappointment, and Aritos the Shark, who I guess is also a snack, it would be wise to simply go on to the spells. Each and every spell specifically summons one of the Alchemy Beasts by name from the hand or deck, as the graveyard is simply supposed to be non-existent. Even when the monster's effects are abysmal, the spells don't help, as the cards need Mrs. Potts to be on the field to activate, because otherwise it would be too broken, I guess. Simply too circumstantial and bricky to be considered anything but a lost cause. A way to fix this would have been a single spell card that says you can summon one Alchemy Beast from your hand deck or graveyard when you have Kettle. Maybe make it continuous and search another copy of itself during the end phase or something. You have a pretty decent spamming deck that can make rank 3s like their name's BA. Since this was during the whole Sacred Beast fiasco in GX, those continuous spells can be tributed for Haman if you really want to. See, I can think of these things in like a minute. Why couldn't Anime Konami? In case the idea of centering an entire archetype around a single card sounded like a bad idea, Genix! Anime Konami made even more cards like it. But they look like they were drawn in MS Paint by one of the interns that was given 10 minutes to draw 4 cards and basically said, fuck it, we got Venn diagrams. Wide Process Albedo is a spell card that summons out a golden homunculus from your hand or deck as long as you control the unfunny meme. To see how good this card is, throw a gander at the golden giant himself. He's an 1800 attack, level 6, that gains 300 attack for each banished card. Of yours. They were so close to making this card just that little bit better, but they messed it up! They knew Alchemy Beast would be doomed to be kicked out of locals for the exact opposite reason as Zodiacs. Anyway, the attack gain is pretty sizable, especially with the introduction of Pot of Desires into the deck, and Homunculus can actually one-shot your opponent if you live long enough. A card that can bring this beast out of the deck is pretty nice, and make sure you don't have to waste a tribute to get it out. Which is pretty important, because there's no way in hell you can play the kettle, play a spell to get out a beast, and then tribute Homunculus without wasting your entire hand and hoping you didn't draw the goddamn beast in the first place. Decent card to run 2 of with one Homunculus. Black Process is a spell card that requires the Patty Gadget and no cards in hand. Already off to an amazing start, I see. You can banish all Alchemy Beasts you control and draw 2 cards for each, effectively going plus and allowing you to summon ever more Alchemy Beasts if your draws are in your favor. This card is actually quite good, if a tad circumstantial. Channel. Yellow Process Kitten Linux tributes the skinny Helios for the thick Helios, which is something Duo Magistus already does from the hand. While this can summon a slightly stronger monster from the deck, neither monster is actually a good card by most means, so we'll get to them when we get to them. Red Process Ruby Doe is the same thing but tributes thick Helios for triple Helios. And in my opinion, this one can be summed up with the last segment, but only more so. Since we're done with the cards that should artistically fit like a puzzle, but I guess just don't, we can move on to the Helios cards that are a direct tie-in to the Alchemy Beasts. Strangely enough, they're actually all printed in real, and all of them are terrible. Helios the Primordial Sun is a level 4 light pyro monster. That's the reason you can Solemn Warning a Macrocosmos, regardless of actually having one in your deck. You know a card is good when it debilitates a better card that actually gets used, as if the world would explode if this deck was anything beyond pure liquid ass. It gains 100 attack for each removed from play monster, which is a shame because it would be infinitely better to include spells and traps as well, considering Dan Rather banishes every kind. Seriously, it only gets worse with each incarnation. Thick Helios is a level 6 that can be special summoned by tributing regular Helios or using the Catmac. It's Helios, but gets 200 for each banished monster and has the following effect. If the card is destroyed by battle and... Actually, wait, let me zoom in on this one. Sent to the graveyard. Yeah, we're both reading that, right? Special summon it during the end phase and give it a whopping 300 attack. The archetype is based on banishing monsters, but it actually needs to use the graveyard for 2 monsters. That, coupled with the fact that it takes until the end phase and has to be by battle, really makes Duo Magistus complete anti-synergy for a deck that never knew what it wanted to do in the first place. And it only gets worse, because triple Helios is just what happens when you get really caught up in what you think's a great idea until your friend smacks you and gives you some sense. The 200 is bumped to 300 for each monster banished, and it still will never be summoned from the grave. Why? Attacking twice is a nice bonus, but for all the cards and effort it takes to bring out, Golden Homunculus and even Gren Maju Daiza, a card introduced outside the archetype, does the job better. But at least you can summon it with a spell or by tributing Thick Helios, right? Lastly, Planet Alignment is a quick play spell card that is Raigeki when you have Helios on the field. It's actually a pretty good card, especially since Helios can be summoned from the deck with Macrocosmos and, oh, I don't know, actually normal summoned. This makes for a very good comeback tool, or even a play disruptor during your opponent's turn. Oh, then it has the 300 burn damage for absolutely no reason. Like, there's no synergy within the archetype, there's nothing that has anything else to do with burn, it just kind of burns for 300. I'll take it. Alright, now to give it a grading scale. In honor of the SAT, we're going to actually not think about that grading scale for a little bit, it's way too real for me. We're going to be using standard letter grades. Consistency. This deck is primarily supporting of the idea of bringing out 500 attack monsters that attack directly, banishing your own cards to power up other monsters to high amounts of attack, and having a specific continuous spell card on the field to do any of this. While there's a way to summon the beasts, Helios and Homunculus from the deck, the fact that the beasts themselves can't be normal summoned really hurts them. The idea of getting Kettle is hard enough, but getting other cards along with it is simply asking too much. Power ceiling. The most this deck can realistically do is summon a Gorgonic Guardian or 2, or make Golden Homunculus strong enough to win in 1 attack. While the deck itself is terrible in its own win condition, the Man of Gold helps ever so slightly in this regard, as well as nearly monopolizing a great Xyz monster. Relevance. Okay, so let's just forget for a moment that this is an anime archetype and just put it in real life. This deck can't keep up with any current meta deck, especially with MST, Twin Twisters, Galaxy Cyclone, and all the other similar cards running around. That coupled with the fact that it can only win with one card, and you have a deck that won't even top locals. Creativity, and this is where the archetype shines, as having Nami monsters as the entire archetype is something unheard of, as is the empowerment of banishing your own cards. I honestly quite like the fact that every monster has a different attribute and unique look to them, and I feel like it had potential and squandered it. This doesn't really affect the overall rating, but it's a way to look at the positive side. Invulnerability. This deck collapses from any MST clone. This deck kills itself, really.